Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. Today, I sat down with Dr. Kayla Clarke. She is a naturopathic doctor, and she has chosen to explore some modalities and some different parts, different elements of health and healing that I don't feel like are discussed enough. In this particular episode, we went everywhere from talking about the elements of health and healing, neurons and dopamine, empaths, highly sensitive people. We talked about sound healing. We talked about frequencies, our relationship with the earth, and everything around us, how we're influenced by our external environment, but also how we influence it. It's a pretty in-depth conversation, and we touched on a lot of incredible topics. So I won't get into too much more detail. I don't want to give away too much more of it, but I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Please don't forget to like this podcast. Please subscribe and please leave a review and or share it with anybody who you feel like could benefit from this message. So thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. Today, I am here with Dr. Kayla Clarke. Kayla is a naturopathic doctor, and you have a really fascinating approach to naturopathic medicine. I think, of course, there's definitely overlap because I do have an awareness of your approach to how you do things. But in particular, why I wanted you to come on here today is because you have started venturing out into a world of information that I am so new to and find so fascinating. So I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Yes, me too. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So you're in Texas right now.
I am. I'm in Austin. I just moved to Austin from Vancouver or from Squamish. So a very, very different kind of vibe, but still really fun and learning a lot here.
So cool. And it's warm down there right now, right?
Well, it snowed yesterday, which is super weird. But it's been like 20 to 25 and sunny every day. So I'm like sitting outside in my backyard in January with like a cold drink, and I'm like, this just seems wrong, but at the same time seems so right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that sounds amazing right now. I've been watching more and more of your reels lately too. You've been doing a lot of like really informative ones of like these new kind of like what you talk about with the association of our bodies and the environment and how we're energetically connected to it. And so yeah, how about we start our conversation off with how you got into learning more about this world?
Yeah. So I honestly, I just kind of decided to follow my interests, to be honest with you, and like kind of go from all the things that I like to learn about in my own personal life, my own journey. And then I think that I just honestly feel when I talk to people, and like, yes, I'm sure you can relate, when you talk to people that are doing things that they actually are interested in and authentic, like it just comes off better, and they're more effective and they're more impactful. So I kind of started an experiment to do that. And I'm trained as a naturopathic doctor, as are you. So you understand, like, our training is more it's more on the like medical kind of side of things, like nutrition, physiology, anatomy, and all of that stuff. But I think as we're starting to just move forward, we're realizing the impact or the effect of, like, health goes beyond the physical, right? It's hugely mental, emotional, spiritual, and then also, and kind of what I'm starting to explore a little bit more, and what I love talking about and learning about is that spiritual side, but also that energetic side. The term like quantum physics gets thrown a lot of nowadays, and I don't know a lot of people even understand what that is, and we can maybe get into that a little bit too. But like, I love that side of things, and then sort of tying it to the ancient modalities and the ancient understanding of medicine. So like traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture is one system, or like Ayurvedic medicine, or even like shamanism and all these really old styles of medicine, and kind of teasing out like the things that they teach and then applying it to more of like a modern day understanding. And a lot of that ties to our connection with nature and the universe and the world around us, and like the seasons and genetics and all of that kind of stuff. So
Oh
that's a
my
big
gosh.
mishmash, I guess, of what I love to learn about and teach about.
Oh, that's so fascinating. That actually reminds me a little bit of there was a docu series that I had watched like a few weeks ago. It was, I think it's called The Story of God. It's
Ooh,
on, it's a National Geographic docu series, and I just purchased all of them. They were pretty inexpensive on YouTube. But it's hosted by Morgan Freeman, and it's like him going around the world, like exploring, different religions, different ideologies, and the similarities and differences of them, and like bringing that relationship with the earth again. And it was beyond incredible, but it just reminded me of what you're saying, just from like a slightly different
ooh.
perspective.
I've never heard of that, but I'm definitely going to go watch it. That's like, I love that.
Oh
And
yeah.
anything narrated by Morgan Freeman is just like a little bit more legit, right?
Yes, exactly. That's why I was like, oh yes, sold. I'm definitely listening to this.
Right.
That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, I already said to you before I hit the record button that, like, even for me to ask you questions, it's like I'm not even clear exactly on like how to like direct a very specific question. So if I say something and it just kind of like rings for you, just kind of like redirect it and talk about what makes the most sense of like
Cool.
what's said. So I noticed a little while ago that you had mentioned something about um, the energetics, or the energy that kind of comes from the earth, and how it shifts over time, and how that influences our behaviors or how our bodies operate. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I think if you're referring to just like how our biology is adapted to Earth, to also like the shift in the seasons, I'm really big on that. Like
Yeah.
how our DNA actually changes during the different shifts, and then just like exploring our connection more. So I don't know if you've ever heard of like the Schumann resonances, but like those are sort of ways. So basically, like we as humans, we've been around for a long time, and we've evolved with the earth, with other creatures, with other animals, with the energy, with the seasons, with the plants. Like we're not independent of those things. And I think a lot of the last 100 years or so, we've sort of lost that. Like we've kind of lost our connection. We live in houses and cities. We have artificial lights. We don't really go outside as much. We're not as connected to the seasons changing, or like how the plants or the animals, or even the light and stuff like that. Uh, and we evolved over thousands of years with these processes. So our biology definitely kind of follows these cycles. And I think that that's really important when it comes to health and just how we're feeling on the day to day. So some examples that we do know about are like, seasonal affective disorder. In the wintertime, we're not exposed to as much sunlight, so that can affect our mood, our mental health. That's like kind of one example, but also like the light and the way that the seasons change will actually change our DNA. So there's something called epigenetics. Epigenetics is like the idea of our DNA is our DNA,
Mm.
and then the epigenetic idea is like we can sort of change our DNA. So nature around us, or even the thoughts we think, or the foods we eat, or various things around us will cause like these little shifts, and will actually change the structure of our DNA. So this will change essentially how like our health, our mood, our all these sorts of things, which is a really interesting and cool idea, because we always thought, not always, but in our modern world, we thought like DNA is DNA. It is what it is. You can't
Mhm.
change it. You can't change your genetics, but that's potentially not true at all. So that's really cool.
So fascinating. So do you kind of link in any types of the genetic testing with any of that type of stuff, or how do you approach that?
I do. I've started to. So like the idea of epigenetics is not really new to humans. It exists in all of these kind of older schools of thought. But for us in our modern science age, we haven't really been able to, like, we've mapped the genome now. So we can do genetic tests like 23andMe and the ancestry and all that stuff. But we're just starting to understand this concept of epigenetics and how the genes will actually change and what's causing those to change. So we can't really necessarily like watch what happens to one gene through the next yet. I'm sure we'll get there. We're still we're in the new ages of that. But when it comes to like genetics and understanding testing, and then yes, I definitely use that. But that's just kind of the first layer.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's actually such a new um I mean, you probably have learned the stuff, the Dr. Ben Lynch and the
Yeah,
MTHFR. Yeah,
yeah.
so that's like, as a naturopathic doctor, if there's other NDs who are listening to this, it's like, oh yes, we know Ben Lynch.
Yeah, Ben Lynch, Dr. Joe Dispenza is like
Mhm,
another kind of same but different, but like he's another doctor that talks a lot about this sort of stuff. So
mhm.
he's another really great one to listen to.
Okay, amazing. I'm actually happy that you brought up Joe Dispenza because I do have questions for you about that. So I'm assuming that you're very familiar with the Supernatural, Becoming Supernatural, his book.
Yeah, I haven't read it. It's been a long time to be honest, but yeah, I have read it a while ago.
Yeah. What I found really interesting about it is that it's kind of along the similar lines of my understanding of like these new concepts that are pretty integrated into what you do, um, and the whole idea of like our association relationship with the environment around us, but also how we can influence the environment around us. Can you speak to
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yes. So let me see how I want to word this. So I, without getting into like too much of the quantum physics stuff, of like just the basic understanding of our material world is that, and you've probably heard this term in like the new age people, but like everything is vibration. We're all vibration. We all have a frequency. But what does that actually mean? So like essentially that's the world of physics. That's the world we live in. Like this pen, all these electrons, you and me, when we go down to like the bottom of how things work, an electron moves, right? It's like it moves in space, and all of these things together, they when they move in space, they like displace energy, and then that energy displacement is what we call in the science world like a frequency or a vibration. So that's what we're actually measuring when we say, what is the frequency of whatever, this plant, of you, of this pen? It's how much energy is being displaced by these moving parts. And when we get smaller and smaller and smaller to electrons and then beyond that, that is what's called like the quantum world. So we're just starting to understand that, like how these little pieces are moving, how they're sort of comprising like the energy or the frequency of things. So like everything has an energetic signature or a frequency, whether it be this pen, whether it be the plant, whether it be you or me. We all have this like energetic displacement. And so it's physics, like that's just how it is. We're starting to be able to measure with like our modern science now. We're starting to be able to measure each frequency that is emitted by person, an animal, plant, whatever, with our stuff. And so we're starting to be able to understand, first of all, like, yes, um, what we're intaking will change our frequency. So, like our food, our environment, our thoughts, which is something Joe Dispenza talks about a lot, is our
Mhm.
thoughts will actually go into our bodies, will change how our cells are vibrating, which will change our overall frequency, which is what we're emitting to the world. Um, and then now we're starting to sort of understand the concept of I posted about this, I think yesterday, but a morphic field or an aura, which
Yes.
is
Oh,
another
good.
kind of
I
term.
wanted you to elaborate on that. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So the morphic field it's a concept that kind of was more studied in biology. So biology, like microbiology, molecular biology, which is like they ask the question, and it's a great question, like how does a liver cell know to turn into a liver cell and not a heart cell or what anything like that. And
Mhm.
so the idea was like, and they've started studying this idea of a morphic field, which is kind of like an energetic layer that exists in the world, and that, okay, I'm hoping this makes sense, so please stop me if it doesn't or ask questions,
All
but
right.
like
Will do.
the DNA that's in a liver cell is correlated to a certain morphic field or aura or whatever. And then this field gives the instructions to the liver cell to change to like develop into a liver cell.
Okay.
And like a heart cell has the same, and like humans have their own morphic field. We develop into humans and not an animal or whatever.
Right.
And so this morphic field is like an energetic sort of layer. Maybe you could call it like the collective unconscious, the aura, just all of these like energetic layers that are existing that we can't physically see.
Mhm.
And so we download information from this morphic field via like sensory organs and different things that we don't quite understand yet in our modern medicine world. That's where you kind of find the stuff in the ancient stuff. But we download information from these energetic fields, and we also input information into these energetic fields. So if we tie it back to what we were just talking about, whatever our vibration is, whatever energy displacement we're sort of giving off, this will also affect the morphic field or the aura or the whatever you want to call it around us. And so if we have like enough people that are giving off one set of energy, it will change sort of the whole energetic field, and then other people, whether they're conscious of it or not, and animals and other things will sort of tap into that.
Okay.
So it's like a constant like flux of giving and receiving different energies and different things that may like directly impact our bodies.
That's fascinating. So when you were talking, I was just thinking about this. So like giving off um a certain energy, would that be an emotion, like only an emotion, or like what would constitute like these different types of energies that we might be emitting?
Like what contributes to these kinds of energies, or like what are they, perhaps?
Yeah, like
Or
because I'm trying to think of it like from you know my comprehension of how I might apply this like in an applicable setting where it's like, okay, so if you walk into a room, for example, and someone is really angry, it's like some of us can sense that something's not right, and we may not consciously be aware of like picking up the fact that like so and so's angry, but maybe start experiencing anger um, just from like sensing that vibration or that emotional energy. Am
yeah,
I like,
okay.
is that around in the scope of like kind of what you're explaining?
Yeah, it totally
Okay.
is. And yeah. So that's so that's exactly it. Like if you're
Okay.
angry, then your vibration or your energetic signature, your cells are going to change, and that's going to go into the field or um your aura or the little bubble surrounding you,
Okay.
and other people can sort of tap into that and feel that depending on how sensitive they are to other energies. And again, a lot of us maybe aren't aware of how we actually input this information. Maybe a lot of us are like aware of the fact that we're not great with boundaries, that if you're feeling happy, I'm going to absorb that energy. And that is kind of like what an empath or a highly sensitive person, they're more in tune with these energetic fields, whether they know it or not.
Mm. Okay, cool. That's actually a perfect segue into my questions for you about HSPs, highly sensitive people, and empaths. Um, First off, first question is, are they the same thing or not?
Not really. I mean, like same, but different. So an empath is more of a person that is in touch with these energetic fields more so. It's like the kind of person that has trouble with boundaries, that has trouble saying no, that really wants to help be a people pleaser. Um, they're really sensitive to like stuff on TV or other emotions. Like if you're feeling really sad, I'd be able to really tune into that and like take on that sadness. Um, in our modern world, sometimes empaths struggle with that because a lot of us have a lot of emotions, and being around like large crowds or large groups of people, especially nowadays when a lot of people are just feeling anxiety and a lot of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
empaths will actually tune into that. And so we'll have trouble sort of shutting down those boundaries and, keeping our energy contained and not absorbing other people's stuff, essentially. A
Okay.
highly sensitive person, an empath is a highly sensitive person. So an HSP is more like, yes, they might be an empath, so they might be sensitive to other people's energies and emotions, but they're just sensitive in general. So,
Okay.
like loud noises or bright lights, or HSPs tend to be sensitive to like the environment, so allergies, fatigue, like just are overwhelmed quite quickly. And this actually is they're starting to understand it actually has to go down. It goes down to genetics and like the way our nervous systems are wired and the way like our brains are wired. We have different responses to like the dopamine system, and we have more mirror neurons, which I can talk about if you're interested with that kind of stuff. But
Yes, please.
yeah, okay. So it's not just like, oh, you're an empath. It's now we can study this sort of stuff. And so our biology is different. So around 20% is what they think is, the population of people who are empaths or HSPs. I don't know if they've quite separated those terms yet, but what it what they have found is that excuse me, people with these nervous systems have more mirror neurons in their brains. So mirror neurons are the part of our body, or like the part of our neurology that helps us understand and identify and connect with other people. So it's like that. If you do feel sad, or like if someone's feeling an emotion, the mirror neurons in our brain allow us to sort of mirror that, essentially, like understand that emotion, those small cues in their body language, their voice, all of these things, and either allow us to just understand that or maybe help mirror it back. So it goes back to like building safety and community and like cohesion among these groups. Is like empaths really are wired to help people feel connected and heard and understood. So like people like our modern day counselors, or just we know people that are just really good at helping you feel good and heard and understood. So that's kind of how empaths are wired with the mirror neurons. We also have a different dopamine sort of response system. Um, it's toned down a little bit, so we're more sensitive to like to those dopamine hits. So a lot of the time you'll see HSPs or empaths, they prefer like being quiet. Maybe they're more introverted. They like nights at home, don't love the crowds and the parties in general, right? And this is because we're more sensitive to those cues of overwhelm, and so our systems will get overwhelmed quicker, essentially.
Wow, that's really interesting. What about because with the dopamine pathways and dopamine being like that reward center or that reward neurotransmitter, and the association of dopamine with addiction, is that something like with empaths and addiction tendency? Like, do you notice that there's a type of correlation with that too?
Yeah, 100%. And it's exactly like what you just said. It's the same reason. Like we're tuned a little bit to be more sensitive to that. And so with overwhelm, like our systems will kind of gravitate towards like that overwhelm or that addictive sort of pattern, because it's trying to calibrate more sensitive. And our world is built for dopamine hits, especially now. Like every time you open your phone and you get that little heart, dopamine hit. Every
Yeah.
time you like hear a jingle, dopamine hit. Every time you whatever, dopamine hit. And that's how advertising works. Like that's kind of how our whole society is built now. And so for empaths and HSPs living in this kind of world and not being cognizant of all of this overwhelm, it translates into our nervous system. And so our nervous system will start to take on this stuff.
Hmm. And would you say that's kind of where like physical manifestations over time will start to happen with people, like chronic illnesses or what have
Yeah,
you? Okay.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, chronic illness, a lot of like fatigue, chronic fatigue, and like those fibromyalgia and kind of those nervous system conditions that we don't quite understand yet. A lot of that I think has to do with just our nervous systems being tuned differently and taking on this stuff, and then having it be overwhelmed. So like I kind of mentioned and I talked about before, the trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Mhm.
Um, those are all kind of the things that will translate into our system, and then will show up in how we act and how we exist, and then also just the physical manifestations of that.
Yeah. And I think that kind of segues a little bit too with um, just you were saying that I was thinking of that the metaphor of the tire track where it's like you're constantly like reinforcing this one tire track on a dirt road, so it's like now then the tractor will always be like on these two tire tracks. And I feel like especially for well for anybody, for any human being, but on this topic of discussion with empaths and HSPs, where it's like you get so used to like being on this tire track of like this type of integration of like a constant stress response in a sense that it's like it's not impossible to get out of, but it always leaves with the question of like, well, how on earth do I get out of what I've created for myself unconsciously?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, totally.
it's
It's
like
hard.
it is hard. And it's I
So
think
hard.
especially right now in the world with everything that's going on, I love that we're having this conversation right now because I have a sense that there are more and more of us out there that are starting to become more consciously aware of our relationship with the collective and like how we are affected from things in our external world, like the news, for example, or other people's things that they take on, and then also like how we may affect other people as well, and like
Yeah,
that awareness. Um, but then the question is like, how do you get out of it?
that is the question.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that like I think as people are becoming more aware of that, of just like you said, that we're all connected, the collective energy and this sort of aspect of ourselves. I honestly think awareness is really the first step, and it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a year. Like it's a constant sort of flux and flow. How we're becoming aware of our own patterns, aware of our own traumas, and like even it's so complex if you go back into our DNA and ancestry, but then also how our subconscious mind develops. So between the ages of 0 and 7, that's sort of when our brains and our whole perspective and viewpoint of the world is being developed, right? Because we're so young, we're learning and observing, and we're internalizing that, and we're creating a perspective and like a story and our beliefs around the world. And so those things too will affect all of these trauma patterns combined with the sensitive nervous system. And a lot of us, a lot of us will carry the idea of like, or do right now, of like success is hard. I have to work hard. I have to hustle. I have to be on all the time. I have to do this, 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 this. I have to follow the rules of society. And I think it's really great that it's starting to change. It's starting to shift. We're starting to become more of aware of like, hey, maybe that pattern or maybe that belief system isn't true.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think that's really, really cool and really important.
Yeah. The awareness bit's I'm glad you brought that up, because I think awareness is a very misunderstood term, I think, unless you understand what it means. Like most
Yeah.
things, where it's like, well, what does awareness mean? So can you offer like some guidance on like what you think people who are just kind of getting started on kind of like opening up to this stuff, like what awareness looks like to you?
Yeah. That's actually a really good point is like, what does that actually mean, being
Yeah.
aware? Um, I think I think that for myself and like for people in general, it's to be curious, to just be curious. To if you if you blow up at your friend or your spouse or whatever, to note to like just at least just acknowledge like, wow, that made me mad. I think that's step one, honestly. And then beyond that, it'll be like, okay, well, why did that make me mad?
Hmm.
Which honestly asking that question or even realizing like that made me mad, that's a really tough thing to do, especially when you're in that reactionary state, which is a lot when a lot of this stuff comes up, when a lot of this pent up energy, when a lot of this belief system comes up. It's when we're in a high emotion state. Doesn't always need to be like anger or sadness, but that's kind of what ends up happening. um and like for myself too, it's almost impossible sometimes to sit down and be like, wow, I'm really mad, like why am I really mad? But I think that's sort of how it starts, and it starts slowly.
Hmm. Yeah, I can relate to that. That's actually something for me, because it's like, I'm really into human design. So I'm going to like mention like a little thing about it, where
Yeah.
there's something as a manifester for me in human design, that there's something called like blackout anger, which is
Cool. Not cool, but like I'm
not
interested
cool,
with.
but yeah, but yeah, because people's not self themes in human design are basically like a language for you to understand what doesn't work for you, like what doesn't align with you, what's not so good for you, or what have you. And so, as a manifester, mine is anger. That's my not self theme. Like that, like emotion would be something for me to like, start to learn to take cues on of understanding. Yours would be bitterness, because yours is a projector. Um, but with the anger thing, I really do struggle with that. And it was just what you were saying, where it's like when you're kind of in like a moment of being really angry about something, or like overwhelmed with any type of emotion, it is so difficult to take a step back, to like just kind of reevaluate, like why are you feeling this way, and like do something about it, like something constructive over time. It's like it's such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And like honestly doing something about it comes, I don't even know, like like actually changing that pattern, that comes way down the line. I think like just noticing first is a huge step. And I love that you brought human design into it too, because I think all these systems, I'm super fascinated with human design too, because it's another way to help us to basically like understand and conceptualize all of these things. So
Hmm.
like the not self, I think, is, if I understand correctly, it's like all of the things that like, actually, can you explain it? So if like you're feeling angry, I don't want to say it wrong. If you're feeling angry, for you, that's your not self. Does that mean that like anger isn't in your blueprint, or it's coming from somewhere else, or?
It's so the way that it's kind of explained is that it's almost like the universe the universe's way of pinging something to you that you need to look at that, or that's not it's something that either like you need to make a point to change, or that it's pushing you farther out of alignment. So like not being in alignment with my true self, my response to that would be anger.
Cool. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like human design is another one of those like I know it's not ancient, but like it draws from a lot of these older
Yes.
ideas too, and it helps us understand these things and understand these patterns. So like I know you have a completely different understanding of yourself now, and like even I do. I've only had one or two readings, and like I totally understand a few more aspects of this, and then also combining that with just like counseling and what I know about myself and how I respond to things. It's like been really huge in my physical health and like just how I exist in the world.
Yeah, completely. It's like there's a million different ways to get from A to B, right?
Yeah.
And I think too, like as naturopathic doctors, that we also have that understanding because, we're trained in homeopathic medicine, we're trained in Asian medicine, like we do acupuncture, and then we're trained in functional medicine where it's like, about orthomolecular medicine and nutrition and supplements and IV therapy. So like there's so much, but it's just, and all of these things are helpful. It's just like putting them together in a way that works. um I don't know. It's like you can make them all work. They can all get you from A to B. um
Yeah.
yeah. So it's human design, birth charting, like all that type of stuff. Any of these, like the older, like some of the things that you were talking about, like Ayurvedic medicine, for example, all that stuff. They're all like amazing modalities, and one isn't better than the other. It's just like learning what works best for you so that you can have those tools to learn about this
Yeah.
stuff that you're talking about.
Totally. And like you said, everything gets from A to B. There's a million different ways. And I think that there's the same with just this understanding. Like there's Ayurvedic medicine, human design, Chinese medicine. Like if you actually read into these, which I haven't a whole lot, obviously they're 1,000-year-old ancient systems to understand, but like a lot of the concepts and a lot of the things they're saying, and then you apply it to like modern medicine and quantum physics and modern religion or ancient religion, like they're all saying a similar thing, like,
Mhm.
or, even the same thing, just in a different way, different language, a different concept. So that's really fascinating when you start paying attention to that, is like how things work. You can really look at it, read a different book, but like essentially it's a very similar idea.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. That reminds me a little bit too of, um, are you a yoga instructor as well?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
actually kind of why like I'm in this world is yoga.
Yes, exactly. So are you familiar with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali? But yeah, right?
Hmm.
And have you ever read it before?
Not in its entirety, no.
Yeah, it's what I find fascinating about it is that, so for those of us listening, the Yoga Sutras are basically like the how to of yoga, in a sense of like what yoga is, what it stands for, what the point of it is, and what have you. Um, but what's really cool is that it's the translation from Sanskrit into whatever language, so English. But even from there, it's like that translation, um, making it make sense in another language is almost like the translation between one modality of medicine and another. And just what you were talking about with this overlap that can happen of like, they're all kind of saying like on a certain level saying similar things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point for like even like the Bible, the Catholic religion or Christian religion, which is most prominent in our society. Most of us understand that. It's the same thing. Like it was translated so many times, and like what we're reading may or may not be how what was actually written or
Hmm.
spoken or whatever.
Yeah, even translation between languages and how that would have shifted things.
Yeah. Well, yoga too is interesting because like a lot of us, it's more than just like the asana. Asana is one. There's eight limbs or like eight parts of yoga, and they all have their different subcategories. The yoga poses that we do are like one of many. So yoga is like a whole ancient system that goes beyond that. So like in the sutras, they are like it's going more into the philosophy and like nature and like Taoism, which is the Chinese kind of version, maybe not really version, but like they all kind of say very similar themes, and like they all emphasize energy and the energetic bodies, and then also our connection with the nature and the energy again, which is kind of full circle to what we started with. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's so fascinating, all that stuff. And actually that kind of segues into, because I want to ask you more about your singing bowls.
Hmm.
Yeah, because my understanding of singing bowls, it's like is kind of like a yogic related relationship for me. But yeah, would you mind sharing a little bit more about them?
Yes. Okay. So a little bit of like a backstory is just music in general. I think that I grew up playing piano. I'm by no means amazing pianist or anything, but just understanding, if you go back to what we were talking about with like vibration
Mhm.
and stuff, like that's what music is. That's what sound is. You could apply the same thing to light, but we'll just talk about sound because it's creating a frequency, it's creating a vibration. And so singing bowls or just music, rhythm, frequencies in general are using that idea of like um, creating different frequencies to heal our bodies. So, like, that's what sound healing is. Like, our brains emit certain frequencies during, depending on what state of consciousness we're in. So, like, when we're meditating, we'll be at a different frequency. When we're sleeping, we'll be at a different frequency. When we're concentrating, and our brains will actually change states. And so, using like sound uh, via singing bowls or music or whatever is the idea that it can change these frequencies in our brain and also in our just energy and body in general. So the singing bowls are kind of in the yoga tradition what was used for doing that. And when you go to like a sound healing now, that's what the basis of it is. It's using different frequencies or combinations of frequencies excuse me, to like to make that, to heal or to alter states of consciousness or to um, change your DNA. So this is like if you go back into those ancient systems, they have a better understanding of what they're actually doing. But so the singing bowls in the modern sort of sense are I guess equated to one of the chakras in the body. So chakras are in Indian medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, they're energetic centers. So probably a lot of us have heard this term before. Uh, but like in Chinese medicine, it's meridians. In Ayurvedic medicine, it's nadis or the chakras. So the chakras are, there's seven main ones and they run up and down the spine, and essentially they're correlated with different organs, different systems, different pieces of ourselves, and using these bowls or sound or music is set to sort of open or manipulate these energy centers. So sometimes in these schools of medicine, disease is viewed as like a blockage of these energy centers.
Mm.
So it's the same in Chinese medicine. That's how acupuncture, it's like unblocking and allowing the energy to flow. So the singing bowls are essentially doing that with sound and frequency.
That's so
Have,
fascinating.
yeah. Have you ever heard one of them? They're quite like
No, it's actually
piercing.
something that I've never, I think like for me over the years, it's like I have my level of appreciation and um understanding of a lot of that stuff. Like, I've never been to a sound healing ceremony or anything like that. I actually have my own singing bowl, but it's more like my interest of all that stuff kind of stemmed out from like the trendiness of it.
Hmm.
right? As opposed to that deep understanding of it. And I think too, just and this is why like I love talking to you about this, because I really found that as a naturopathic doctor and as I was going through naturopathic medical school, that I felt like in order to prove myself of like my my validity, I guess, with this profession, that I needed to be 100% research backed, on absolutely everything. And so I kind of like let go of like this whole other side of healing, because of that. So yeah, I love that this is why we're having the conversation. So no, full circle from what I just said. It's a huge tangent there, but no, I actually haven't heard them before, but they're so beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you for actually bringing that up too. I totally resonate with that. For a long time, I was like, even yoga, even being a yoga teacher, I was like, oh no, this kind of puts me in like that camp,
Yeah.
which like being a yoga teacher and like what does that have to do with anything? But yeah, it's crazy that we're even as naturopathic doctors, which we assuming some of us went into that field because we're more interested and we understand that health goes beyond just the physical, beyond pharmaceuticals, beyond what the physical things we're doing, and like to we're trying to, I guess, a lot of us, especially in Canada or in BC or um, Ontario or wherever, it's like we're trying to not to almost compete with the medical system in order to be legit. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of like homeopathy is a big one that people don't like naturopathic doctors because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that gets a lot of fear, and like I still deal with that too. Like, am I going to be legit? Like, are people just going to think I'm like some hippie sound healer? And if they do, like, that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah. It's
I'm
just not
over it.
for them. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just not for them.
I feel like people like Joe Dispenza have actually been, well, for me personally, have been like that bit of permission, if you will, to be more outwardly accepting of some of these alternate forms of healing that exist. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if Zach Bush is another one too that I've
Oh my God.
started.
I love Dr. Zach Bush. He's my
Right?
favorite. Yes.
Yeah. So him as well, and just the sheer fact too that he's even a medical doctor, and like some of the things that he's bringing to light and the conversations that he's having are really pushing the envelope. Um, even for like, I just think it's incredible to see that someone like him is willing to, you know, stand up for what he believes in and to get this information out there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
And I think like what you were saying before, people being just more aware or curious about this sort of stuff when you have someone like Zach Bush or Joe Dispenza or Dr. Bruce Lipton is another good
Mm,
one. If you heard The
mm-hmm.
Biology of Belief,
Yeah.
he writes about that a lot. But I think like in an age where a lot of us know that the information we're getting online or from the media or from the news is maybe not right, maybe it is, maybe it's not, we have no idea anymore. I think a lot of us are starting to realize that we have to make these decisions, we have to think for ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to require, we don't have the information. And so I think just like tuning into our own intuition and like maybe you jive with singing bowls, maybe you don't, maybe you jive with nutrition and diet, maybe you don't, like sort of just understanding or contemplating or thinking about what's true, what feels true. And like I think Zach Bush is a great example because he's a medical doctor, so that's how he's trained, but the things he talks about, like they make sense,
Mm-hmm.
like they just make sense if you think about it, and a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, and like it's just running it through your own filter. But I think like that's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. It even kind of completely changes like how I personally have even viewed something like nutrition, or even supplements as well. yeah, it's completely like reshifted everything of how I thought I knew everything already.
We never know everything.
I know, right? It's always the tip of the
Never.
iceberg.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool when you're in like actually in practice treating people is like just tuning into another person's energy or where they're at or their physical body, and like that's kind of what we do as naturopathic doctors is like recognizing that each person is completely different.
Mhm.
Each person's like disease or condition like is going to look completely different from the next person with the same condition, and their treatment approach is going to be different because they have completely different biology, genetics, upbringing, understandings, belief systems. All of this stuff is completely different, and I think like it's really fun for me to have someone in front of me and to be able to like create a healing plan or whatever based on their own unique whatever their own unique self. So whether that be more energetic, whether that be more homeopathic, or whether that be more tangible like supplements or diet or a combination of all of those things, like I think getting from A to B, like it's a really fun, it can be a really fun and interesting process.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's like it's always it goes back to that whole the root cause of everything. And the root cause is so different for so many different people, especially that energetic portion, like what we're talking
Yeah.
about today. And why it's so appropriate.
Totally. And like I always tell people like you're the best healer for yourself. You're your own best healer. Like doctors, teacher is one of our, it's one of our philosophies, like treat the whole person, treat the root cause. It's like understanding that we're here, we're, our role is really meant to be a guide to sort of help you understand your own needs and your own health so you can take that stuff and prevent it and really thrive. But the goal of doctors and medicine, it's sort of been shifted, but like I don't think it was ever really or should ever really be like, you know, put us on the pedestal and we're going to heal you.
Hmm.
Like that's just not how it works.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that um yeah, such a like big game changer too in terms of like burnout for a doctor of
Oh my
like
god, yeah.
changing your responsibility, like where the responsibility lies. Like yes, it is our responsibility to be like on top of everything, to have the skills and knowledge to be able to help support someone on their healing journey, but it is not our responsibility to take on that person's healing journey, which I feel like is why like so many of us who are in this profession are also empaths and lack that awareness of where the responsibility lies and where that boundary responsibility being synonymous with where that is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Like a lot of us, and naturopathic medicine is majority is women, and like that just we have trouble with that empath sort of thing, and like that's kind of why we a lot of us went into this field of healing is because we want to help heal, we want to help, we want to treat the whole person, but like, and I still struggle with this. I think a lot of us do is like, how do you create that boundary? How do you not absorb that energy? Um, and like not take responsibility. And I think like the person, you need to take responsibility for your own health, and
Yeah,
we haven't really been taught or given the opportunity to do that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's slowly changing, which is great to see, but oh my goodness, there's still a
Yeah.
lot of long ways to go.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, I want to end this conversation by asking you, what are some like really simple, like maybe 1 to 3 suggestions that you would have, that we can start working on at home in terms of um, like becoming more connected with ourselves or with our environment, or lessening that burden of taking on things that aren't ours, kind of like a summary of what we just discussed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I don't want to give anything like that's crazy because I like this is hard work. It's deep work.
Hmm.
It's not as simple, like you said, it's just like stopping and recognizing when you're mad. Like that's really hard to do.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of us, I think like honestly, deep breathing, deep belly breathing is one of the quickest and easiest ways for us to reset our nervous system. So that actually will reset the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is one of the most ancient nervous system pathways we have as mammals, and it runs from our brains into our stomach and controls our parasympathetic, like rest and calm system. And so the concept of like vagus nerve exists in all healing traditions, I think, and like a lot of people understood that. And I think that's honestly one of the simplest and easiest ways to reset our system.
I love
I
that.
tell
That's
all,
such a great
yeah,
idea.
yeah, I tell all my patients and like everybody, and I do it, try to do it myself. Like first thing you do in the morning, one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and just 10 or 5 deep belly breaths, and like actually feeling your um, bottom hand like rise and expand under your belly.
Okay.
So the vagus nerve runs, like it actually runs through your diaphragm and connects to your stomach. So when you're expanding your belly and you're expanding your diaphragm like that, you're actually physically stimulating that nerve. And that will kind of help just calm and like ground that nervous system response for the day. And then it just, starting to carry that awareness and spark that curiosity as you move through your day, starting to pay more attention. Again, it's a very slow process, maybe even just like a flick of like one day, like, oh, I wonder why that made me upset. And like
Mm.
just sort of carrying it on from there. And then I think honestly, like hiring or working with a coach or naturopathic doctor or somebody, like I think coaching is really great for that, for
Mhm.
this kind of stuff, to actually bring awareness and bring accountability to it. But I do think like starting that process and work um, starts at home. And then I think a lot of us just need support in doing that.
Yeah, very well said. I think those were all great suggestions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a really
Yeah.
fun conversation.
That was an amazing conversation. I'm like in awe right now. I feel like I'm gonna have so many more questions for you after this.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah,
This is obviously my favorite topic to talk about. So,
amazing. So I will put more details about Kayla in the show notes below where you can find her, and some of the things that she's got going on online because some of them are, well, all of them are pretty incredible. And yeah, where you can find her on Instagram too, because she's got a wealth of information on there as well. So thank you so much, Kayla.
yeah, thank you.
And there you have it. If you guys are like jaw dropping just as much as I am, then I did my job correctly. Kayla is fascinating, so fascinating. And that was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the world of these new concepts and new ideas of health and healing from this whole other perspective and how it can complement things that you're already doing. Yeah, just incredible, absolutely incredible. So I will leave her information where you can find her if you'd like to follow along with her on Instagram, or if you'd like to learn more about any of her online courses and offerings. I will leave all of that information below for you guys. And thank you so much for being here.